Edinburgh by Andy Miles, formerly a Liberal Democrat, directly involved in the negotiations of two Scottish executive coalitions. He now plans to vote yes. And here in Glasgow, law professor Adam Tomkins gives advice to the Better Together campaign. Good evening to both of you. Andy Miles, as a negotiating position when it comes to the currency, does no mean no in this instance?
I think that the Westminster crew don't have the right to say no. They're trying to say there will be no negotiations about this, but it seems pretty daft. It's not the rest of the UK's pound, it's all of our pound, and that's the basis of the SNP position. And it will of course be negotiable. But I don't know where the Westminster style negotiators think they're going, because they're not even setting out a negotiating stall. They don't have a bottom or a top line. They're just saying no, and it comes off as sort of playground petulance.
Is that the bottom line, Adam Tomkins, that ultimately, if there's a yes vote, everything's up for negotiation?
No, I'm afraid that's not right, and what we just heard from Andy is legally incorrect. It's very important that we understand that if there is a yes vote in September, what that means in legal terms is that Scotland will have voted to leave the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom will continue. It will be without 30% of its landmass and be without 8.5% of its population, but it will continue. And all of the institutions of the United Kingdom will, as a matter of law, automatically become the institutions of the rest of the United Kingdom, including the Bank of England and including the United Kingdom's pound.
But
and it will then
they will have to negotiate, will they not, the rest of the UK in good faith with a Scottish population that has said yes in a referendum?
They have to negotiate within a framework of law. And what those negotiations will be about is the distribution, the equitable apportionment, as we lawyers call it, of the United Kingdom's assets and liabilities, but not the United Kingdom's institutions. The UK would have no greater share of Edinburgh Castle than an independent Scotland would have of the Westminster Parliament or of the Bank of England.
Is that the confusion here, Andy Miles?
Legally straightforward.
Is it assets versus institutions?
No, the confusion here is this legal interpretation, which is just nonsense.
The law is nonsense.
You know, what legal authority does anybody have at the present moment to say that Scotland will be leaving the UK? In fact, no. There will be one state, and it will split into two parts, and they will both be successor states.
That's incorrect as a matter of law.
And well, the only people who can seriously say that are the European Court of Justice or the international courts.
I mean, this is absolute nonsense. I'm sorry, but it's not a question of...
They're the only people who can do it, and I'm afraid I'm fed up hearing this reinterpretation of international law from the Better Together campaign. I'm afraid that that there are loads and loads of legal experts out there, legal experts in international law, who will tell you that this is complete nonsense and that the only people who can decide it are the international courts, primarily the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg.
But there needs to be a pragmatic approach.
I'm sorry, point number one, the European Court of Justice is not a court of international law, it's a court of EU law, which isn't international law. It's a different legal system altogether, so that's completely erroneous. Point number two, when the Irish Free State was created in 1922, what happened in international law was that it left the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland became the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. If Scotland votes to become an independent state, then all that means as a matter of international law is that it votes to leave the UK. And what we've just heard is international law fiction, not international law reality.
Let me ask you a little more about this whole negotiation. If no does not mean no when it comes to the currency, Andy Miles, does that mean that the Scottish Government's position on nuclear weapons, for instance, is also perhaps bad negotiation at this stage by saying it's a line in the sand?
What I think at the present moment is that the SNP and the Yes campaign are tending to stick to the idea that they're not going to put down preconditions for the negotiations. They're stating what fields there are there to be negotiated. And if you listen carefully to what's in the white paper and what Alex Salmond and others are saying, they're saying that the weapons are going to go. They're not putting a timetable on it because they know that that's got to be negotiated. So they're not trying to accept preconditions. But what's happening from the Westminster end, where they've got a lot less experience of negotiated politics and a lot more experience of yah-booery and getting their own way. What they're doing is saying, we're going to have this precondition, we're going to have that precondition, we're going to have the next precondition. And frankly, I'm afraid it just doesn't add up.
Is that a fair point?
It'll leave a very sour feel if there is a yes vote on September the 18th.
Are nuclear weapons a bit of a trump card then when it comes to negotiating? Because, as Andy Miles suggests there, it's the timescale ultimately of when they would be removed that could be negotiated and used as leverage to gain that currency union.
That's right. I mean, if there's a yes vote in September, then there will be independence negotiations. And the strongest card in Scotland's hand at that point becomes the fact that Scotland, as a newly sovereign state, wishes to rid itself of nuclear weapons. And the reason why that's such a strong card is because the decommissioning of Faslane and Coulport and putting the United Kingdom's nuclear base elsewhere in the rest of the United Kingdom is an astronomically expensive business. And you can well imagine how there might be some negotiation around how long that takes, who pays for it. It's enormously complicated. But what I think that does is it puts into doubt the idea, which is the SNP's idea, not Westminster's idea, certainly not the UK government's idea, that all of this can somehow be wrapped up inside 18 months and Scotland can move from referendum day to Independence Day by March 2016, which is entirely fanciful.
Well, to be fair, on the issue of nuclear weapons, they haven't said that that would be the case in such a short space of time. But some kind of
agreement about what's going to happen to Faslane and Coulport, what's going to happen to Trident would have to be presumably agreed before March 2016 for Scotland to become independent, even if the submarines were still there.
And I suppose, Andy Miles, compromise is one thing, but if you betray a point of principle, and some argue that that's what happened with the Lib Dems and tuition fees going into the Westminster coalition, then the electorate could easily punish you for that.
Well, the electorate are punishing the Liberal Democrats for that. Ironically, they're still punishing them here in Scotland, where the Liberal Democrats, in fact, in the coalition negotiations, negotiated the abolition of the self-same. But that's the way that polls run and people's opinions change. In negotiating terms, you've got to go in with a serious negotiating position. You've got to be adult about these things. You've got to be prepared. And it just seems to me that at the present moment, the negotiations that do come up are going to be a lot more difficult and a lot more sour and bitter because all these ridiculous preconditions are being set by the Westminster end of things at the present moment.
OK, gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed.